An Amish family in Pennsylvania opened a jar of preserved green beans last winter. That jar had been sitting in their root cellar for 4 years. No refrigeration, no electricity, no preservatives. The beans were perfect. 4 years. And they tasted like they were picked last summer. Now let me ask you something. When was the last time food in your house lasted 4 weeks, let alone 4 years? That's not luck. That's not magic. That's 11 preservation methods the Amish have been using quietly for 3 centuries, while the rest of us forgot that food storage was ever a skill. And every single one of them, you can start today. In your kitchen, with what you already own. Let me show you all 11. Welcome back to Amish Greenland. In the last video we covered the 10 healing plants that sit at the heart of the Amish medicine tradition. Today we go into the other half of that self-sufficient life, the food. Because for the Amish, preserving food is not a hobby. It is not a trend. It is the foundation of how a family survives a winter, an emergency, a hard season. And the methods they use are older, simpler, and more effective than anything a modern kitchen has replaced them with. Before we go into the 11 methods, I want to give you something that will make everything else make sense, the Amish philosophy of food itself. Because without understanding how they think about food, the methods are just techniques. With it, they become a complete way of life. 11 methods. Starting right now. Chapter 1. The Amish philosophy of food. Most modern households think about food in a very specific way. You buy what you need for the week. You store it in a refrigerator. You go back to the store when it runs out. The Amish think about food in an entirely different way, and that difference is the reason a jar of green beans can sit in a cellar for 4 years and come out perfect. For the Amish, food storage is not reactive. It is not something you think about when the pantry is empty. It is a continuous, seasonal, intentional practice that runs parallel to everything else in daily life. They work from a principle that sounds simple but changes everything once you truly absorb it. The best time to prepare for winter is in the height of summer. In practical terms, this means the following. From the first harvest in June through to the last harvest in October, every Amish household is simultaneously eating fresh food and building a reserve of preserved food that will carry them through the months ahead. They are not doing this in a panic. They are not doing it all at once. They are doing it steadily, method by method, week by week, as each crop comes ready. Tomatoes ripen in August. To August is canning month. Apples come in September, so September is drying and pressing month. The pig is slaughtered in October, so October is curing and smoking month. Every season has its preservation rhythm. And that rhythm, maintained across generations, produces a pantry that never runs out, never wastes, and never depends on a supply chain. That is what we are building today. Not just 11 techniques. A system. Chapter 2. The cold methods. Methods 1, 2, and 3. Preservation without heat. The first 3 methods on this list share one important characteristic. They require no heat, no cooking, and no equipment beyond what most households already have. They are the oldest preservation methods in existence. And they are the ones most people have completely forgotten. Method 1. Root cellaring. Here is the science behind it, and it is remarkably simple. Most root vegetables, carrots, beets, turnips, potatoes, parsnips, celeriac, are living organisms even after harvest. They continue to respire slowly. They are not dead. They are dormant. The conditions that keep them dormant and prevent decay are 3. Cool temperature, high humidity, and complete darkness. A traditional Amish root cellar maintains 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit and around 90% humidity. In those conditions, the vegetable's own biology works in your favor. The cold slows cellular breakdown. The humidity prevents dehydration. The darkness prevents any further growth or sprouting. Carrots stored this way last up to 8 months. Beets up to 5 months. Potatoes through an entire winter. Turnips and parsnips similar. Now, you do not need a cellar. You need a cool, dark, humid space. The corner of an unheated garage. A styrofoam cooler packed with damp sand, with vegetables buried inside it. A spare refrigerator set to its highest temperature setting with vegetables stored in perforated plastic bags to maintain humidity. The Amish principle applies wherever you can replicate those 3 conditions. Cool, humid, dark. One additional note. The Amish never store root vegetables that have been washed. Washing removes the natural protective coating on the skin. They brush off loose soil and store them as is. That coating is part of the preservation. Method 2. Cold storage in brine. This is one that most people confuse with fermentation. They are different, and the difference matters. Fermentation uses a lower salt concentration, typically 2 to 3%, and actively encourages bacterial activity to transform the food over time. The result is sauerkraut, pickles, kimchi. The food changes. It becomes something new. Brine storage uses a much higher salt concentration, 8 to 10%, specifically to prevent bacterial activity altogether. The food does not transform. It simply waits. In a 10% brine solution, cucumbers stay crisp. Green tomatoes hold their texture. Cabbage remains fresh. Peppers maintain their bite for months. The Amish store vegetables this way in ceramic crocks, the same crocks their grandparents used, and their grandparents before them. The vegetables are packed in, submerged completely under brine, weighted with a wooden disc or a clean stone, and covered with a cloth. When they want to eat the vegetables, they simply remove them, rinse them thoroughly to remove the salt, and prepare them exactly as they would a freshly picked vegetable. There is no process to monitor, no temperature to manage, no intervention required. You prepare the crock once, and it takes care of itself. That self-maintaining quality, food that does not need you once it is stored, is deeply characteristic of how the Amish approach preservation as a whole. Method 3. Salt curing. This takes the same principle as brine storage, and applies it to meat. The science is this. Bacteria require moisture to survive and reproduce. Salt draws moisture out of meat through a process called osmosis. The salt on the surface creates a concentration gradient that pulls water out of the cells. As moisture leaves, the environment becomes increasingly hostile to bacterial growth. At sufficient salt concentration, the meat becomes microbiologically stable. It does not spoil. It can be stored at cool temperatures for months. The Amish use two primary salt curing methods. Dry curing, where the meat is packed directly in salt, and sometimes a small amount of sugar and curing spices, turned regularly as moisture is drawn out. And wet curing, where the meat is submerged in a concentrated brine solution for a period of days to weeks depending on the size of the cut. A dry-cured Amish ham, finished with cold smoking and hung in a cool cellar, will last 6 months to a year without refrigeration. The sugar in Amish cures is not merely for flavor, though it does contribute. Sugar counterbalances the harshness of the salt, and also feeds beneficial bacteria that produce additional preservative compounds during the curing process. It is a precision that developed through practice, long before anyone understood the microbiology behind it. The Amish traditionally slaughter in October or November, when temperatures drop, and natural cold assists the curing process. That timing is not coincidental. It reflects generations of understanding about how temperature, salt, and time interact. Chapter 3. The Hot Methods. Methods 4, 5, and 6. Preservation through heat. The next three methods all use heat as their primary preservation mechanism, and they represent the heart of what most people picture when they imagine an Amish kitchen in full production. Jars lined up, pots boiling, the smell of fruit and vinegar and wood smoke. These are the methods that build the visible pantry. The jars on the shelf, the smoked hams hanging from the rafters. This is where the preservation becomes something you can see and smell and feel. Method 4. Water bath canning. This is the method that fills an Amish pantry floor to ceiling with the colors of summer. Here is how it works. Food is prepared, cooked, seasoned, packed, and sealed inside glass jars with two-piece metal lids. Those jars are then submerged in a large pot of boiling water for a specific, tested period of time. Two things happen during that processing time. First, the heat destroys harmful microorganisms, bacteria, yeasts, molds, that would otherwise cause spoilage. Second, as the jars cool after removal from the water, the air inside contracts, pulling the lid down and forming an airtight vacuum seal. That vacuum seal is what makes water bath canned food shelf stable for 1 to 5 years depending on the food type. Water bath canning is appropriate for high-acid foods. Tomatoes, fruit, jams and jellies, pickles, apple butter, pie fillings, salsa. High acid content, naturally present or added through lemon juice or vinegar, prevents the growth of the most dangerous pathogens at boiling water temperatures. The Amish process hundreds of jars through summer and early autumn. Some households put up 500 jars or more in a single season. That pantry feeds a family of 8 through winter without a single grocery store trip. The equipment required is minimal. A large deep pot with a rack to keep jars off the bottom. Glass canning jars, ball or mason jars are the standard. New lids for each use, though rings can be reused. A jar lifter, a wide funnel, a bubble remover. That is the complete equipment list. Start with tomatoes. 1 batch. 10 jars. The process takes 3 hours from start to finish. And the moment you hear that first lid ping as it seals, you will understand exactly why the Amish have been doing this for generations. Method 5. Pressure canning. Before I explain how it works, I want to address the intimidation directly. Pressure canning has a reputation for being dangerous, or technically demanding. That reputation comes from the early days of home canning, when equipment was less reliable and information was limited. Modern pressure canners are engineered with multiple safety mechanisms. When used according to tested instructions, pressure canning is completely safe. Here is the science. Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. That temperature is sufficient to destroy most bacteria and spoilage organisms, but it is not sufficient to destroy Clostridium botulinum, the bacterium responsible for botulism, in low-acid environments. Low-acid foods include meat, poultry, fish, beans, corn, carrots, green beans, and most vegetables that are not pickled. In these foods, 212 degrees is simply not hot enough to be safe. A pressure canner raises the internal temperature to 240 degrees Fahrenheit by processing under pressure. At 240 degrees, Clostridium botulinum is destroyed. Low-acid foods become completely safe for long-term shelf storage. The Amish pressure can everything they grow that cannot be waterbath canned safely. Green beans, whole corn, chicken broth, venison, pork, dried beans, carrots, soup bases. Processing times vary by food type and jar size and have been extensively tested by the USDA and the National Center for Home Food Preservation. You do not need to calculate these yourself. You follow the tested guidelines. That discipline is the entire safety requirement. If you take one preservation method off this list and commit to learning it fully, make it this one. The ability to safely preserve any food you grow or buy in bulk is the foundation of genuine food self-sufficiency. Method 6. Smoking. This is the preservation method that also transforms. Every other method on this list preserves the food as it is. Smoking is different. It takes meat and fish and cheese and gives them something they did not have before: a depth of flavor, a complexity, a character that develops through hours in contact with fragrant wood smoke. The preservation mechanism of smoking operates on 3 levels simultaneously. First, heat. The elevated temperature in a hot smoker reduces moisture content, creating an environment less hospitable to microbial growth. Second, chemistry. Wood smoke contains hundreds of compounds, including phenols, aldehydes, and organic acids, many of which have demonstrated antimicrobial properties. These compounds deposit on the surface of the food and create a barrier against spoilage organisms. Third, surface drying. The combination of heat and airflow during smoking creates a pellicle, a dry, slightly tacky surface layer, that physically limits bacterial access to the interior of the food. The Amish use 2 forms of smoking: hot smoking, where the food is cooked and smoked simultaneously at temperatures between 165 and 185 degrees, and cold smoking, where the food is exposed to smoke at temperatures below 90 degrees for extended periods, sometimes days, without cooking it. Cold smoked products require additional preservation, usually prior salt curing, because the temperatures involved do not cook or pasteurize the food. A cold smoked Amish ham will have been dry cured for 2 weeks before it ever sees smoke. Wood selection in Amish smoking is deliberate and traditional. Hickory for pork. Its strong, rich smoke penetrates the dense fat of a ham over long hours. Apple and cherry for poultry and fish. Their lighter, slightly sweet smoke complements rather than overwhelms. Maple for cheese. Mild and clean. These pairings were not invented. They were discovered, refined over generations of practice until they became the standard. Chapter 4. The Living Methods. Methods 7, 8, and 9. Preservation through transformation. The next 3 methods work differently from everything we have covered so far. The cold methods and the hot methods preserve food by stopping change, by making the environment hostile to the organisms that cause decay. These 3 methods work by allowing a specific, controlled change to happen, and using that change as the preservation itself. They are alive, and that aliveness is what makes them in many ways the most remarkable methods on this list. Method 7. Lacto-fermentation. This is the method that will change how you think about bacteria permanently. Most of us have been taught to think of bacteria as the enemy of food preservation, something to destroy, eliminate, prevent. That thinking is correct for most harmful pathogens. But there is a family of bacteria, Lactobacillus, that is not your enemy. It is your ally. And it has been the Amish ally in food preservation for 3 centuries. Here is how lacto-fermentation works. When vegetables are submerged in a low-concentration saltwater brine, 2 to 3% salt, the salt selectively inhibits harmful bacteria while allowing Lactobacillus to thrive. Lactobacillus is naturally present on the surface of all fresh vegetables. As Lactobacillus consumes the natural sugars in the vegetables, it produces lactic acid. That lactic acid progressively acidifies the environment in the jar. As the pH drops, even the salt-tolerant harmful bacteria cannot survive. The jar becomes self-preserving. The entire process requires salt, water, vegetables, a jar, and time. There is no equipment. There is no cooking. There is no heat. The preservation happens entirely through microbial activity. Sauerkraut is lacto-fermented cabbage. Traditional dill pickles are lacto-fermented cucumbers. Kimchi is lacto-fermented vegetables. Every culture in the temperate world developed versions of this method independently, because the ingredients are universal, and the method works without any technology whatsoever. Now here is what makes lacto-fermented vegetables different from everything else in your pantry. They are not just preserved. They are nutritionally superior to the fresh vegetables they came from. The fermentation process increases the bioavailability of nutrients. It synthesizes B vitamins including B12. It produces billions of probiotic organisms that support gut health, immune function, and digestion. The Amish were maintaining the health of their gut microbiome across generations through a daily practice they simply called putting up vegetables, long before the concept of a microbiome existed. A properly fermented jar of vegetables, kept at cool temperatures, lasts 1 to 2 years. Compare that to a vinegar-pickled jar, which is shelf-stable but completely dead, every beneficial organism destroyed by the acid. The Amish way preserves the food and its life simultaneously. Method 8. Honey preservation. I want to begin with a fact. Archaeologists excavating ancient Egyptian tombs have found sealed jars of honey that are over 3,000 years old. The honey was still edible. Honey is the only food substance in human history with a documented indefinite shelf life under normal storage conditions. It does not spoil. It does not expire. It does not degrade. The reason is threefold. First, honey has extremely low water content, typically less than 17%, which prevents bacterial growth, since bacteria require moisture to survive. Second, honey is highly acidic, with a pH between 3.2 and 4.5, which inhibits most pathogens. Third, honey naturally produces small amounts of hydrogen peroxide through an enzyme called glucose oxidase, giving it active antimicrobial properties. The Amish have kept bees as long as they have farmed. Raw honey, honey that has not been heated or filtered, retains all three of these properties in full. Commercial honey is often heated during processing, which destroys the glucose oxidase enzyme and reduces antimicrobial activity. Amish raw honey is both a food and a preservation medium, and they use it as both. Fruits submerged in raw honey, figs, berries, stone fruits, citrus peel, are preserved by the honey's water-drawing properties. Over weeks and months, the honey slowly draws moisture from the fruit, and the fruit releases its sugars and flavors into the honey. Both are transformed. Both last indefinitely. Garlic and honey is one of the oldest Amish medicinal preparations. The honey preserves the garlic, and the garlic's compounds infuse the honey, creating a preparation used for immune support, respiratory health, and infection. Ginger and honey. Turmeric and honey. Medicinal herbs and honey. Medicinal herbs and honey. The Amish pantry and the Amish medicine cabinet converge at this point, because honey does not distinguish between food and medicine. It simply preserves whatever is placed in it, indefinitely. Method 9. Fat preservation. CONFIT. Specifically the technique the French call confit, though the Amish have been doing it long before they adopted that name. The principle is elegant in its simplicity. Fat is impermeable to air. Bacteria and molds that cause food spoilage require oxygen to function. If you completely surround food in fat with no air pockets remaining, you have created an environment where spoilage cannot occur. The process works as follows. Meat, typically duck, goose, pork, rabbit, or chicken, is first salt-cured for 12 to 48 hours. It is then cooked very slowly, fully submerged in its own rendered fat, at a low temperature, around 200 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit, for several hours until completely tender. The cooked meat is then packed into jars or crocks, and the cooking fat is poured over it, completely covering the meat with at least an inch of fat above the surface. As the fat cools, it solidifies, forming a complete seal. Stored in a cool cellar, confit prepared this way lasts 3 to 6 months. Some preparations, when the fat seal is kept fully intact, have been documented to last over a year. There is an additional quality to confit that no other preservation method produces. The slow cooking in fat does something to the texture and flavor of the meat that cannot be replicated by any other method. The collagen in the meat breaks down entirely over those long, slow hours. The fat penetrates the muscle fibers. When you open that jar months later and gently warm the contents, the meat is more tender, more flavorful, more complex than it was the day it was made. Preservation that improves the food over time. That is the Amish relationship with patience expressed through cooking. Chapter 5. The drying methods. Methods 10 and 11. Preservation through removal of moisture. The final two methods share the same fundamental mechanism as salt curing, the removal of moisture, but they achieve it differently. Through air. Through time. Through the patient cooperation with natural processes that defines everything the Amish do. Method 10. Dehydrating and air drying. This predates every other method on this list by thousands of years. The science is straightforward. Bacteria, yeasts, and molds all require water to carry out their metabolic processes. Remove water below a critical threshold, typically below 13% moisture content for most foods, and those organisms become inactive. The food enters a state of biological stasis. The Amish dry food, using 3 methods depending on the item. Air drying. Herbs, flowers, and some thin sliced fruits hung in warm rooms with good air circulation. Solar drying. Sliced fruit and vegetables spread on wooden drying racks in direct sunlight during warm, dry weather. And oven drying. Low heat, door slightly ajar, for foods that require faster processing or are being dried in cool or humid conditions. Dried apple rings kept in a sealed jar last 12 to 18 months. Dried herbs last 2 years or more with full potency. Dried beans and legumes are shelf-stable for 5 to 10 years when stored correctly. The Amish dry specific foods at specific times because they understand the moisture content of their environment changes with the season. August and September, when humidity drops and temperatures remain warm, that is the primary drying season. The air itself does half the work. A note on herb drying that is worth remembering. Herbs should be harvested in the morning after the dew has dried but before the heat of the day peaks. This is when essential oil content is highest. They should be bundled loosely. Tight bundles trap moisture and cause mold. And they should hang in a space with airflow but away from direct sunlight, which degrades both color and active compounds. Those three details, morning harvest, loose bundle, indirect airflow, are the difference between dried herbs that retain their medicinal and culinary value, and dried herbs that are simply dead plant matter. Method 11. The Amish Pantry System. The method that holds all 10 together. Method 11 is not a technique. It is a system. And it is, in many ways, the most important thing on this entire list, because without it, the other 10 methods are simply individual skills. With it, they become a complete and self-sustaining way of life. The Amish pantry operates on a set of principles that have been refined across generations. I want to give them to you directly. Principle 1. Rotate always. Oldest preserved food in front, newest behind. Every time you add to the pantry, new jars go to the back. Every time you take from the pantry, you take from the front. Nothing sits untouched at the back until it expires. This single discipline eliminates food waste almost entirely. Principle 2. Preserve in proportion to consumption. The Amish don't preserve what they think they might want. They track what their family consumes over a year and preserve that quantity, with a planned surplus for unexpected needs, guests, or a poor following harvest. Preservation is not maximalist. It is calibrated. Principle 3. Diversify methods across the same ingredient. The Amish do not preserve all their tomatoes the same way. Some are water bath canned as whole tomatoes. Some become tomato sauce. Some become salsa. Some are dried into concentrated paste. This diversification means that if any single preservation method fails, a jar that doesn't seal, a batch of dried food that absorbs moisture, the entire tomato supply is not lost. Principle 4. The pantry breathes with the year. The Amish pantry is full in November and progressively emptied through winter and spring. By June, it is nearly empty. By November, it is full again. This rhythm is intentional. A pantry that never empties is a pantry that contains food too old to be at its best. The annual cycle ensures constant freshness within the preservation window of each method. Principle 5. Every family member knows the system. In an Amish household, children learn pantry management as a fundamental life skill. They know which jars are oldest. They know which foods are running low. They know what needs to be preserved before the season ends. This shared knowledge means the system is resilient. It does not depend on one person's memory or availability. Those 5 principles, applied across the 11 methods we have covered today, produce something that no modern refrigerator, no grocery store delivery service, and no amount of stockpiling can replicate. A pantry that genuinely takes care of a family. Season after season, generation after generation, without interruption. 11 methods: root cellaring, brine storage, salt curing, water bath canning, pressure canning, smoking, lacto fermentation, honey preservation, confit, dehydrating, and the pantry system that holds all 10 of them together. Every one of these methods is older than electricity. Everyone works without modern equipment. And every one of them is being used by Amish families right now, today, in kitchens not far from where you're sitting. They are not using them because they have no other choice. They are using them because they work, because they have always worked, and because 3 centuries of practice is worth more than 3 decades of modern convenience. The 4-year jar of green beans I told you about at the start of this video. That jar exists because of this system. Not because of any single method, because of all 11 working together, maintained season by season, generation by generation. You can build that, starting today. If any of this was useful to you, and based on 300 years of Amish practice, it should be, the best thing you can do right now is hit subscribe. Because everything in this video goes deeper, in the videos coming next. The next video on this channel is the Amish foraging calendar, 13 wild plants they harvest every season, growing freely along every path and field boundary in the temperate world. Free food, free medicine. Growing right now, within walking distance of most people watching this. And after that, the Amish herb garden. What they grow, where they grow it, and why every single plant has a purpose. Subscribe so you don't miss either of those. I publish consistently, and every video goes this deep. Drop a comment below telling me which of these 11 methods you are going to start with first. I read every single one, and that comment tells me what to cover next. And if you know someone who would find this valuable, share it with them. This knowledge deserves to travel.